Reddit. Creepy stories. The best killers are usually the weirdest ones. I sure am one of them. My name is Kalia Liligathgakan. I was born in the extreme deep of the Siberian wilderness, in Russia. My family was part of a large and extremely isolated tribe that had lasted for more than 1,000 years, yet different from native Russians. I had always speculated that we came of British descent a very long time ago, and we branched off into Russia. The members of our tribe were unnaturally tall and strong, also more physically resilient than regular humans, and our members often fought and killed bears with their bare hands. I was an outcast, as cliche as that may sound to you Americans. By the age of 10, most girls in the settlement were 6 feet tall, and I was still of average height. I was still as strong as most of them, though I would regularly be made fun of, as Western as that sounds. Most of the people in our tribe were assholes. My mother stayed at home and worked on cooking and skinning the hunted animals, while my father and 3 brothers went out and hunted for animals. It was a tradition that the fathers teach their children how to survive and fight in the wilderness, and ever since I could walk, my father and his buddies taught me how to fish, fight, spear throw, run, hide, and survive in the wilderness. When I was 15, I saw some kind of dog-like humanoid monster with backward bending arms and a large hinged maw of teeth taking one of the children in its mouth at the tree line, yet no one did anything. I was panicked as fuck and I ended up stabbing the fucker in the fucking back with a bare tooth and severed one of its arteries and ripped its eyes out with my bare hands. Well, it was one big fucking waste because the kid was already dead, and the elders were screaming bloody hell at me. I was then told the secret of our tribe, which was that our tribe, centuries ago, had encountered a race of evil occult monsters living in the deep Russian wilderness, and were about to be slaughtered when they made a deal. Every year, a certain amount of the smartest and best tasting kids with the biggest heads, they ate the brains, would be indiscreetly sacrificed to the monsters in exchange for not killing our whole fucking village and tribe. My parents knew that the monsters would come to me for killing one of them, so in order to save me and the tribe, they quickly gave me a few weapons and food, and water and sent me off with the hopes that they had taught me well and I would be able to kill and fight off the evil monsters. Within a day, the monsters had tracked me, and I led them to a pack of wolves, and the two fought fiercely while I distracted them and ran away, and I got a few miles away. At least a dozen of the occult summoned monsters were tracking me after the fight with the wolves, and they eventually caught up to me in a clearing. I fought like heaven and hell with spears, bow and arrows, knives, and everything I had, but I had ended up breaking 3 of my ribs and getting claw lacerations all over my body. I had managed to skewer one of them through the roof of its mouth with an arrow and I slammed it to the snowy ground and curb stomped the bitch into a log and shot one of the other ones that were lunging at me. I was tired as shit and one of the smaller creatures had escaped me and had run away to bring reinforcements. Still, these motherfuckers couldn't kill a teenage girl. I went on my way in the direction where I thought I would hit civilization. I had never been to 2 big cities. They seemed like myths to our tribe and almost zero outside contact had been made in our entire history, but I was actually going even deeper into the woods. I suddenly entered into an extremely large absence of trees and other vegetation, also known as a rocky field, and there was a giant crater-like hole in the middle of it. Inside, there were giant tunnels and other systems that housed more of the evil occultist summoned monsters. They were all about to attack and kill the shit out of me when there was a giant barrage of gunfire and 16 British SAS soldiers started assaulting the hive of monsters. And they dropped grenades into it and actually went in one of the fucking tunnels and retrieved some sort of ancient occultist necklace artifact used to summon the monsters. I, of course, was freaked the fuck out being that I had never seen anyone outside our tribe, let alone a squad of elite soldiers wearing gas masks and shooting up the place like a Los Angeles alleyway. Afterwards, they retrieved some of the monster corpses and some eggs and they started asking me shit, and I didn't know any English. Luckily, one of the men, Alexei, was originally from Russia and was fluent in the language. Some members of our tribe were also Russian speakers, and my parents were one of them and had taught me some Russian. I was able to loosely converse with Alexei and tell him about the tribe and how they had made a deal with these monsters, and how they were hunting me. This information was apparently extremely valuable and crucial to the Englishman, and I wasn't really welcome in the tribe anyway, so I was flown on a helicopter to the UK, and was questioned more there about the monsters and the tribe's deal. I obviously didn't know shit about the deal besides what my parents had told me, so I was quickly released from questioning, and with nowhere else to go, I lived with Alexei in his apartment with his family, a wife, and their daughter, an only child. His daughter, Sasha, and I soon became best friends, her not having any siblings. Alexei had officially adopted me before I was 16, and he and his wife had become my foster parents. I became a British citizen and got that annoying as fuck accent, and got addicted to tea. I joined the British Armed Forces when I was 18 and was such an exceptional soldier that I had at least 5 medals before I was 20. I served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other Middle East countries, and killed at least 50 or more Taliban, and I was quickly accepted as a British SAS member for my extreme skills. Though it was not officially legal at that time, many military officials and my superiors strongly promoted my acceptance into the British SAS. Sasha got a job as a digital artist and novel writer in New York, and from then on we slowly got separated as the cliche goes. But the reason I was recruited into DOSACD was an extremely classified mission I had done in Afghanistan in 2017 called Operation Arcane. Our main objective was to capture a hidden ISIS base in the deep mountains of Afghanistan. There were rumors within the American and British forces stationed in Afghanistan that the terrorists in that particular base were exploring arcane peasant myths in the area and were also occultists, trying to summon monsters to fight alongside them and destroy the British and American forces stationed there. One of the Afghanistan civilians had reported a dead body surrounded by a triangle of animal bones in the middle of the desert and was nearly killed when he was spotted. So there was a lot of superstition shit going on in there. After being briefed and armed, a dozen of British SAS soldiers went in off-road vehicles to the surrounding area, and we stopped a few miles away from the coordinates and decided to proceed on foot. By the time I was deployed on Operation Arcane, I was unusually strong and had an extreme pain tolerance for my thin stature. I was able to take the electric taser and pepper spray test in boot camp while laughing, and I could beat everyone in my squad at arm wrestling, even Hudson, who was a 200-pound, 6'5" brick wall. Gon be fightin' monsters and shit. Kali, one of the soldiers, Hudson, said. What the fuck are you talking about? I asked Hudson, asking more rhetorically than literally field, where we could visibly see a very large circle of men, at least 50, around some sort of satanic shit. There were at least 10 corpses of men arranged in a line surrounded by a triangle of bones and candles, their fucking chests ripped open to reveal their decomposing ribcages. Heads up, our sergeant said. We've got a visual on those bloody fuckers. Though we were vastly outnumbered, we had the high ground, the element of surprise, more skill, weapons, protective gear, explosives, snipers, and air support. These guys had AK-47s and the power of Allah. We set up our positions on all sides, essentially surrounding and trapping the ISIS terrorists and making a circle around them. I had the impulse to just pull the trigger on my rifle and see brains fly, but our sergeant wanted to see the early results on what these terrorists were doing, since our superiors were very interested in the occultist rituals ISIS was conducting. One of the occultists and ISIS members, presumably the leader, put the blood of one of the dead men on his forehead and chanted a few extremely indistinguishable words, and the rest of the cultists repeated it. He then took off a necklace that I saw through my scope. One I recognized to be very similar to the one Alexei and his squad retrieved out of the monster hive in Siberia. He then put the necklace around one of the dead men's necks and placed a candle in his ribcage. He took out a ceremonial glowing knife and stabbed the dead man and sprinkled some kind of black powder on his corpse, then took 10 steps back and watched. To my utter surprise and delight because I could kill more shit now that the ISIS guys had just summoned monsters. The candle exploded into a fireball and a fucking tentacle came out of the man's chest, and a monster impossibly emerged after that. It was this monstrosity, a monster with an almost human face but with a mouth that looked more of a carnivore, the ends of the hinged jaw literally reaching ear to ear and opening at least 3 times larger than a regular human mouth. It had a very long and extremely jointed bumpy neck, at least 4 feet long, connected to a torso that had 2 very long arms that ended in 3 long fingers and a long, knife-like bony protrusion. Its torso was completely open, revealing a ribcage and 5 beating hearts. The monster's pale torso got skinnier and the lower body was what appeared to be 3 fucking muscular and flexible human spines that ended in very sharp points. It had 6 sharp tendrils coming out of its back, jabbing into the air. This fucker was 7 feet tall and switched from crawling and running, exiting out of the dead human body. More identical monsters burst out of their human bodies, a dozen of them in total. The ISIS leader walked forward and yelled something in Pashto, showing the bloody marks on his face. The monsters tilted their heads, and I expected them to massacre the terrorists, but instead, the first one just stuck out a claw, and it and the ISIS leader fucking shook hands in some sort of agreement. "I've seen enough," Serge said. "Blast those fuckers." "With pleasure," I laughed, and we unloaded, a sudden barrage of bullets, sniper fire, and grenades splattering the ISIS members. Caught off guard, they began to run to a cave in the ground, yelling in their language as we picked them off. We killed at least 20 before the remaining 30 ran into the cave for cover, emerging as I predicted with AK-47s and the power of Allah. They fired at us but luckily, they had only done a couple of fucking jumping jacks and a few days of shooting practice, and most of their shots didn't even get close. I stood from my cover and killed 5 ISIS terrorists within 10 seconds, ducking and reloading only to look up and find that the squadmate beside me had his head missing. I turned to see that one of the monsters had somehow evaded all fire and snuck past our line and began massacring us. And it was just one of the monsters. I decided that I wanted to see some more brains fly and I unloaded a full magazine on the monster's head, every single shot hitting. No wonder my superiors wanted me to join the elite special forces. It just turned, unfazed, and laughed demonically before crawling at me like a fucking spider and stabbing at me with one of its spine-like appendages. I took out my combat knife and stabbed its throat, making it jump back, choking. I picked out my assault rifle and started pelting the monster again before I snapped every one of the joints in its neck and put a grenade in its mouth. "Holy fuck, Callie," Hudson said. "What the hell was that you talking about, me off blown up monster both? Where'd you learn that? Same place you did. Watch the fuck out." Another one of the long-necked monsters screeched and jumped over the hill, nearly biting Hudson's head off. "The neck," I yelled, trading shots with ISIS and reloading. "You gotta snap the neck or stab it." "Why don't I just shoot the bloody fucker?" Hudson said, firing at the monster's neck, but unable to get a shot. The monster's very skinny neck constantly squirming like a snake and moving extremely fast. This thing knew about its own weakness. It was definitely more intelligent than regular monsters. Hudson decided to fuck the monster's neck and fired at the thing's legs, getting no better results. So he distracted it with gunfire directly to its damn eyes before getting up close and snapping the monster's neck, breaking it. It screamed almost like a human and thrashed, its limbs moving erratically and dying. Hudson slit its throat and broke it 5 times again, before covering the other SAS soldiers. I ran across the boulders and crouched beside the sergeant. "Sergeant," I said. "What, Callie?" "I'm a little busy," he yelled, bullets whizzing past us. "I need to go behind enemy lines and fuck them from there. They won't expect it, and I've done this before." "What?" "Fuck no," a terrorist yelled before throwing a string of grenades at us, and I grabbed it and threw it on one of the monsters as it exploded. "Fine. But plan this strategically. And stay behind their sights at all costs, then grenade them from the back when they don't know you're there." "Thanks, Sarg," I said, running past and circling the enemy line 50 feet away, shooting at the unaware terrorists. I was suddenly slammed in the back of my head with the butt of a rifle and I turned and faced an ISIS terrorist wearing a cloak looking at me and screaming something in his language I couldn't understand for shit. I stood up and realized he was completely out of ammo, hence why the terrorist had to sneak up on me and smash the rifle into my head. I laughed maniacally as he screamed and charged at me, swinging the rifle. Oh, you are so fucked. I decided that a gun wound would be a faster death than he deserved, so I dodged every single one of his swings and stabbed his legs, then left him to bleed out as I continued past enemy lines. By now I could tell that the ISIS fighters were very suspicious, as they fired blindly into the brush where I was hiding. I snuck a few feet behind one of them and knifed him in the throat before ducking as they fired at me, now aware, but I was at least drawing fire away from my squad. One of the monsters suddenly leapt out from behind a boulder and grabbed me, throwing me into a boulder and just missing, as I landed, relatively, safely on the ground. If I had hit the boulder, the force from the throw would have surely snapped my spine into oblivion and hell. Fuck you, I yelled, firing a huge barrage of bullets at the smiling monster. It was moving too fast for me to hit it in the neck, and I knew I would either have to use a grenade, which was extremely impractical since I had to hit it directly in the neck, or I could just break the fucker's neck, risking my life. I emptied an entire magazine into the monster's midsection and severed it with the force of the bullets, the torso completely detaching from its slower body in a gory mess. It used its hands and arms as legs, crawling towards me at 30 miles per hour, gnashing its teeth. When it got close enough, I baseball bat swung the end of my rifle into the monster's face, disorientating it as I dove in, stabbing at the monster's neck, but missing and skewering it in one of its eyes and stabbing it out, blinding it in one eye. A tendril stabbed at me, but I was protected by my Kevlar vest, and to my fucking surprise I was able to grab it and rip it in half with my bare hands, and I slammed the sharp bony tip into the monster's other eye, and completely blind it. I jumped back and watched the monster thrash in agony as I chuckled to myself and enjoyed watching it suffer. I threw a rock on its head to disorient it, then I jumped behind it and snapped its head, then severed it and took a breather. I quickly ran to my destination and threw the grenades into the cave where the majority of the ISIS fighters were hiding, and I blew them to high hell. Hell yeah, Hudson yelled. The remaining ISIS fighters were completely mowed down by us, and we were faced by the remaining monsters, 3 of them. Since the only way to kill them was to slice their necks or break them, we distracted the monsters, the smiling men as Sarge called it. A smiling man turned in my direction as I swore and fired at it, giving a clear shot to our best snipers, who were shooting the eyes and necks of the smiling men. With their sight and heads taken away and in extreme dying pain and anger, they began to lash out at anything around them, including the other smiling men. After blinding them all, it only took 3 minutes for all of them to kill each other and die. Well, it's over, let's go back to base and make the report. Some crazy ISIS fucks have been summoning monsters, so, I said to Hudson as our off-road vehicles left the area. How many did you kill? 1, Hudson replied. The one you saw me fight. How many did you kill? Over 3, maybe 5. Probably 15 of them ISIS fucks. After that operation, I had gone back to the deep forests of Siberia to investigate a huge activity and potentially occult and terrorist activity. It was supposed to be a reconnaissance mission, but that all got fucked up. A huge cult, a few hundred people, had found one of the necklaces and ceremonial daggers needed to summon the monsters and had summoned a huge amount of the monsters that had made a deal with my tribe and the ones Alexei and I had fought. The cult only had basic knives, swords, and clubs, so the 16 of us mowed them down fairly easily. And I estimated I had taken out at least 50 to 100 with the grenades and bullets. After we had taken care of the people, the monsters were crawling out of deep tunnels in the dozens, but they weren't impervious to bullets. Yet, they were attacking extremely quickly and in very large numbers, and we were getting very low on ammo. There were at least 500 of them and only 20 of us, and air support was too far, and we had expected a very small resistance. Soon we were down to bayonets on our rifles, combat shovels, bayonets, machetes, and the swords we had taken from the dead cultists. We were dropping like flies and the monsters were only getting more numerous, but Hudson had set explosives into the entrance of the tunnels that needed to be manually set off. It was getting pretty fucking hopeless and I was using my machete to dismember the monsters, but it was obvious I would die pretty soon. It was then down to Hudson and me, as Sudge was decapitated and eaten by the monsters. From the way Sudge went out, he was one of the luckier ones, as the monsters sometimes didn't kill their prey before feeding. Hudson got his left arm cut off and was bleeding profusely, and had deep scratch marks in his chest, and he was going to die anyway. He used his last grenade to clear a path to the manual explosives and told me to run like hell and give this information to the Russians and our superiors, and that he was going to take out this batch and distract them. I said goodbye one last time to him, feeling strange, not as much sadness as I thought I would feel knowing he would die, and I ran off. Hudson spent his last moments slashing through the monsters and making his way to the explosive, and he uttered out his final words. "See you in hell, you bloody bastards." I saw a large fiery explosion that rocked the earth, and at least 100 of the monsters were instantly obliterated, the shrapnel and debris wounding and killing the others. I was running my ass out of there, knowing the monsters would gain their senses and would soon be hunting me down. Now that I was back in my home country and in the environment I grew up in, I could navigate my way with ease through the extremely dense trees, and I made it 20 miles away before stopping to rest. I sat on a log and ate some MREs, blankly looking into the trees and thinking over my day like it was another day in the office. Hudson's sacrifice had reminded me of how a character named Hudson from a movie Alexei had shown me called Aliens had gone out as a total badass. I sighed, stretched my arms, and continued my trek. The British weren't authorized to launch an airstrike and the Russian military decided to bomb the place into oblivion, and they sent in multiple teams of Spetsnaz Special Forces soldiers to go down and fight off all the remaining monsters that had escaped the bombing. Those commies must be fucking badasses, because from what I heard, not a single one of them had died, and there were 500 remaining monsters that had set up other hives. With Sarge dead, I went back to base, and a few months later and a few operations later I was approached by an American bloke named Agent Smith. I wasn't a total dumbass and was a high-functioning sociopath, so I could immediately tell Smith wasn't his real name. Smith told me that he was working for a very special private government military organization called DOSACD and was very interested in hiring me as a replacement for a member of an elite task force that had died recently. I accepted because it looked like both the terrorists and monsters were taking a break, and there wasn't much to fight. I was about to become a glorified mercenary and a successful super soldier experiment, but I had no way of knowing at the time. No fucking way of knowing what I was going to get myself into. That's it. Subscribe, and click the notification button for more stories like this.